Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. And just to kick off our event, raise your hand here if you have a smartphone. Anyone here have a smartphone? OK, so you answered my next question, which is who here has been contacted by a scammer in the last 24 to 48 hours, which is all of us, right? Because it's open season on us, not just here in this room or in Hong Kong, but really globally and around the world. We are literally living in an epidemic of scams. They're all everywhere, and we're being targeted all day everywhere. And you probably know this, given your interest being here in this room, but many people don't know that a lot of these scams are originating from not too far away from here in countries in Southeast Asia, such as Laos, Myanmar, Cambodia, and the Philippines, where we've seen the rise of these really scary, huge scam compounds. They do exist, and we are so thrilled to have here with us Ivan Franceschini and Ling Li, who, together with their co-author Mark Bow, are two of the three co-authors of this important new book on scams and Southeast Asia scam compounds. It's called Scam, Inside Southeast Asia's Cybercrime Compounds. And I am just thrilled to have them here to share with us today some of what they've learned during this long and tedious, painstaking process of reporting such an important and deeply reported, well-researched book that really answers so many of the key questions about the rise of this illicit industry that, again, is out to get all of us. So just a quick introduction. To my immediate right is Ling Li, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Venice, where her research focuses on technology's role in enabling modern slavery and human trafficking in East and Southeast Asia. And in addition to her research, Ling has also spent the last few years providing support to victims of human trafficking who have been trafficked into these compounds, helping them with repatriation, as well as coordinating assistance with local and international non-governmental organizations. So she brings a lot of important experience to this book. And then immediately to her right is Ivan, who is a lecturer at the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne in Australia, where his research focuses on Chinese transnational crime and online fraud. He is also the co-founder of the Made in China Journal and Global China Pulse, which I hope you'll tell us a little bit more later on in our conversation. And Ivan has written extensively on these issues of transnational crime, as well as labor rights and other issues related to China. And a fun fact, he has also co-directed 2 documentaries. So very accomplished speakers here, and I'm so glad again. Thank you so much for joining us. So, just to kick off our conversation, I'm hoping you could just tell us, how did you find the story, or did the story find you? Like, how did you first cross paths with these massive scam compounds, and how did it lead you then to writing this book?
Well, I mean, my work used to be about Chinese investment. I mean, I used to work on labor rights. My work is mostly on labor rights. I used to work in mainland China for many years and working on labor NGOs, social movements, and things like that. And then given the changes in China, in the political situation and everything, my work shifted to Cambodia. That was in the mid-2010s. And then I started looking into the situation in the construction sites, Chinese-owned construction sites in Cambodia. And that was around 2019. I was in Sihanoukville. Sihanoukville is this town, this small city on the coast in Cambodia. And I was doing research in the construction sites there. And then I remember at that time I saw suddenly, I hadn't been in Sihanoukville for a while, and I saw this big compound coming out of nowhere. It was called Chinatown. And I remember the first time I saw that was before COVID, 2019, 18. What is that about? I mean, it was in a small village on the outskirts of the city, next to the beach. And then you had these buildings next to each other, like apartment buildings. There was no wall at that time. It was not a wall compound, but still. And I was doing research in all these sites, construction sites all around, and I just couldn't figure out why this Chinatown came out of nowhere. Yeah. And then it took a while, and then you hear people talk about, they're doing gambling, they're doing online stuff, and then it turns out it was scams. So that was my first exposure. So I think for me it was quite accidental, and then over time you hear more and more and more, and that's how it builds.
It was around 2022. I was doing a research with University of Liverpool on the anti-modern slavery program in Cambodia. That time I was searching about how Cambodian woman was trafficked to Middle East, and that was a very traditional. We know about that. It's happening for years. But then when I reached to Phnom Penh, and then I was talking with like Chinese scholars and then Chinese businessmen, and they were like, "Oh, you are coming to do research. Are you researching about these Chinese people are trafficking to scam compound?" I was like, "I have no idea what's going on." And then they told me out, and it's super dangerous because at that time there was a rescue team leader who is trying to do rescue aftercare operations, got involved to a blood slave case. I think that was in the big, like in the news everywhere in China, in Hong Kong, and they told me to stay away from it. But then I think I know a lot of international organizations, and probably I can get some attention from the international society. So I went to the NGOs in Cambodia, literally knocked their door and then asked them, "Do you know about this, and can you help?" But the answer was no at that time, because yes, the traditional, human trafficking cases are mostly women and children trafficked outside. So the shelters are designed for those groups, and there's no space for Chinese, for foreign nationals trafficked to Cambodia. So that's the kind of the reason I start to say, I'm a researcher, but then I'm also a practitioner, so can I do something? Then I start to talk with IOM, and then I start to know them. Ivan and Mark, they have been doing amazing work. So we decided to do something together. Yeah, that's how I get involved.
Thank you. And many people may not know this about you. Let me stick with you for a second, Ling. But you're not just a terrific researcher who's done a ton of work to really study this in depth, but you're also a first responder, really boots on the ground, coordinating help and rescue and repatriation with these human trafficking victims and their families. And I can imagine, as a journalist covering this, it's sometimes just I get so much anxiety just as a journalist writing about this, and I can't imagine what it's like for you as a first responder being there and having to deal with all of this firsthand. So I'm wondering if you could open up about that a little bit and tell us about what it's like to be a first responder and how do you deal with all of it?
It was not easy, to be honest. So between 2022 to 2025 now, we have been helped more than 300 people. And then I did interview with more than 100 survivors. And then they're all very sad cases. And then when I talk about why I wanted to do this, I always bring one case that really stayed with me for these years and motivated me to do it. So that time was 2022. I met a girl who was trafficked from China to Cambodia by sea, and she was only 16 years old at that time, and she got pregnant inside the compound. After we get her rescued out, she was detained in the immigration detention center. Because at that time, we cannot do victim identification. There's no attention from the government, from the NGOs. So her and her baby were together, detained inside. It's just inhuman for me to see this. Just feel like we have to do something. Even it's very heartbreaking every time to hear their stories.
Yeah. And what is it like as a first responder for you? How do you, how do you deal with it yourself? And what is it like for you to experience this with the families and the survivors?
Well, there's many times I want to give up, that's for sure. But then we do have a team to support me. We now have a protocol of how to interview people and then how to get support from others. Yeah.
And then switching to Ivan, you mentioned construction earlier and the rise of Chinatown. Just to kind of set the stage before we get into some of the deeper topics on this, I'm wondering if you could maybe use Cambodia as a little bit of a case study so that everyone here understands how this industry really came about. So tell us, maybe using Cambodia and Scenicville specifically, if you can tell us about Scenicville as a city. How did it go from being this wannabe Macau to this global cybercrime scam hub?
Well, Sihanoukville is a small town, used to be a small town in Cambodia on the coast, right? And it was famous mostly among backpackers, what a kind of low-end tourism. I went there around early 2010s, And it was like these very nice beaches and stuff. And then it looked like an idyllic place to be, even if it wasn't. It was Russian organized crime at the time. There was a lot of shady stuff going on, but on the surface, it was a very quiet place. Then what happened is around 2017, a lot of Chinese investment came in. A lot of that was from the Philippines and other places, illicit investment. A lot of that was in casinos, because Cambodia at that time used to foster this kind of online gambling industry. It was legal, it was encouraged, right? So Cambodia had this brilliant idea, the Cambodian government, of making Sihanoukville into the Macau of Southeast Asia. So they were trying to lure Chinese investors, foreign investors to build these fancy hotels, casinos, resorts. And that worked because there was a massive influx of investment. The place changed completely. It became a city. It was a town, now it became a city. But what happened is that with the casinos, also crime rose. A lot of Chinese gangsters started coming in, and then they were enforcers, maybe for the casino owners, or maybe they worked together, they opened the casino, we don't know. But there was this massive public security situation. It was a crisis, like locals were scared, a lot of people were scared, there was a lot of crime going on. And then what happened is that suddenly the Cambodian government in 2019 decided one day to the next to ban online gambling, suddenly. No forewarning, nothing, was completely unexpected. And so you had a whole city that was built on the premise, we are going to be the new Macau. We are going to be a luxury destination for Chinese and other, mostly Chinese, but also other tourists. Suddenly that came to nothing. And then a lot of money got lost, a lot of investors fled, a lot of people committed suicide. And so you had all these construction sites, you had all sites, you had all these casinos, all these hotels that didn't know what to do with these facilities. And so, what do? You need to recoup some money at least. And so scams was the obvious way. That was the infrastructure, right? And that was 2019, August 2019, and then COVID came, people left. And then, you have to staff the casinos or scam centers, and then you start to see this kind of human trafficking becoming more and more common. And Sihanoukville became this very infamous place in Southeast Asia. Now it's less famous maybe than in places in Myanmar, Myawaddy, and northern Myanmar, but Sihanoukville is an example how this came to be. But one point, I think, you ask about Cambodia, why Cambodia and everything. I think that's a very important question, right? Because when we discuss the scam industry, we always think about it as a Chinese thing. The angle is always China, 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 Chinese criminals. Yeah, Chinese criminals are the dominant actors in the industry. But we have to ask, why Cambodia? Why certain parts of Myanmar? Why the Philippines or Laos? And the answer is not because, no, there is no governance, poor rule of law. It's not that. It's not there is chaos. Cambodia is not in chaos. Laos is very stable. The Philippines is not. That's the question to ask. Why Cambodia? And the answer is protective umbrellas, facilities, infrastructure, everything is there. All the conditions are there. It's very easy to bring people in by sea, as Lee mentioned that case, she came by boat, or by land, it's quite easy. Myanmar is the same. If you look at that, that's important. Local agency, why these places? That's the real question. China is an important factor. It's controversial. It's complicated. But if we point the fingers only at China, we miss the real point here. Why these places? And also we should remember also that Southeast Asia, we are all fixated on Southeast Asia now. For obvious reason, because we have all this human trafficking and everything. But Southeast Asia is one cluster in the online scam industry. West Africa has been growing enormously. Nigeria, Ghana, they were there before, they're still there. East Europe. There are several, Latin America, certain places. So you have different clusters all over. They all have been growing. We are based here. I work on China, Southeast Asia, so I focus on this. But it's a global industry. So again, why Cambodia? Yes. Why these places? That's an important question. But also we should also pay attention to the global dynamics. So it is a global phenomenon, not only in terms of victims, but also in terms of perpetrators and crime centers. That's really important. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping you could stick with that thought for a second, and maybe if both of you could discuss, in the process of your reporting and research and being on the ground and doing all this important work, what are some of the other misconceptions that you've discovered about this industry in terms of how it's been presented or reported on that you explore in the book?
Well, one is what I just said, that there is this idea that scam center thrives in chaos. They don't. They thrive in stability. They thrive in places where there are networks that can support them. They don't want war around them. They need protection to exist and to operate. And so that's one misconception, and that's quite common. Another misconception is that Lynn can speak more about that. It's about the background of the victims. There is this assumption that the victims of the compound, the people who are trafficked into the compound, they are somehow educated, they speak languages, because they have to scam people, right? So you assume you think scam is a creative process. You think you need to be very savvy to do it. You need to know how to use technology. You need to know how to manipulate people, right? And so you assume, there is this assumption that has been very common about scam victims, human trafficking for scam purposes victims, being educated people who can speak several languages, who know how to use these kind of tools. That's inaccurate. You have that kind of people, of course, it depends. You have a lot of Indian nationals that are trafficking into a compound and they have an IT background. But if you look at the Chinese victims and Vietnamese victims too, and also partly Indonesian, and they're a big part of the crowd in the compounds, they have a very similar profile to ordinary victim of human trafficking. Low education, young, and they don't have an experience, foreign experience, and they don't speak other languages. So the reason why they can do scams is because everything is codified. Everything is formalized. You have tools that can help you with languages and stuff. You have phrase books that tell you exactly what to say and when to say it. You work as a team. It's industrialized scams. So that's the misconception is quite important. And it's very, Lynn can speak more about that, but it's very important because if you assume that the people in the compounds, they're savvy, they are educated, then you think, oh, maybe they're not real victims. They must have known what they were doing, right? It's just the assumption. They are educated, they knew. But when you see a 16-year-old girl, when you see minors, when you see construction workers, Chinese construction workers, being trafficked in the compounds, and that's extremely common, then you see, that's not how we imagine. And that's made possible by an illicit infrastructure. We can talk more about that later, but maybe Lynn wants to.
Yeah. Well, just to add the point to Ivan is the high salary, how they can get lured into the scam compound. Yes, at the beginning, there's a lot of those salaries offered to them are too good to be true. But then according to our research, according to our testimonies, like the construction workers, for example, they got the salary in China for 200 kwai per day, but then they got like 250 kwai in Sihanoukville. And then just for this 50 kwai, they traveled. So how you can just blame them to be greedy. And also, while there's the anti-scam campaign is quite good in China mainland, and then so it's not now that the destination of the jobs are outside of China, like in Thailand after the Wangxing, they switched. The scammers are super flexible, adaptable, like smart. So now all the job advertisements are inside China. So in Guangxi or in Yunnan, and then the salary is reasonable, and they do interviews, and then they make it super look like legitimate. And then once they arrive in Guangxi or Yunnan, they kidnap them and then go through the land from Vietnam to Cambodia or other places. But then that's Chinese and Vietnamese groups. We got a lot of African nationals these days. That's another different story. So we are guessing it's because in India, in Bangladesh, they do have this culture of using an agent. They pay them to get a work outside of their country. That's why they are a bit higher educated, and they got their degree, and they are the breadwinner of their family. But then still, the salary is not absolutely much higher than they thought than it should be. Yeah.
So it sounds like trickery is a big part of how people get into the compounds, being tricked with these fake job ads that turn out not to be true. I'm wondering, what are the different backgrounds in terms of just careers or jobs that you've come across? Because I'm just amazed at the sheer diversity of the jobs that people had. I interviewed a pastry chef at one point. What are some of the careers and jobs that you've seen of people who get tricked into going to these scam compounds that stick with you?
Event planner.
Wow.
Yeah, she got an offer, and she got an offer from a friend. They do event together for 10 years. The event was in Thailand, and she got kidnapped to Myanmar. And she was not even from a bad financial background, so that was quite interesting. And also chef for sure, drivers and plumbers.
DJs.
The plumber, DJs, yeah. Plumbers are they got a real job in the scam compound to fix some of the construction. And then he was forced to stay. So you just get every possible way. And then also, I just read news 2 days ago in China, there's this kind of targeting scholars.
Scholars, yeah.
Yeah, they say
PhDs,
there's an event from United Nations. We're inviting you to come to Thailand to attend something. And then they figure out the email is not like un.org. That's how they figure out it's a scam.
Oh, I see.
So everyone, we're sitting here, you can be a target.
Yeah, it's really scary. And of course, actors, as we all know, in January, the kidnapping of Chinese actor Wang Xing really kicked off a lot of attention on this. And I think one of the key questions that keeps coming up over and over again, and we'll address it here before we kick it over to questions from you all, and we're keen to hear what's on your minds. But one of the main things that people always ask when they start thinking about people being kidnapped and tricked into going to these scam compounds is how many of them either decide to stay there or they decide they want to go there versus they were purely just kidnapped and tricked into going there unwillingly. I'm wondering from your research and everything you found, like how do you think about that question first of all, and then what does your research show?
I mean, that's what makes this industry very murky, one of the many reasons, right? You can never know when, there is no such a thing as a pure ideal victim, right? When the people in the compounds, they work side by side, and you have different types of people. I say they are on a spectrum, I would say. You have the people who enter willingly, and they stay willingly. They know what they're going to do. They think they will get money, they will make easy money, that's the idea. So maybe they're pure criminal, if you want to call them like that. Then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have those people like the construction workers getting kidnapped and brought into the compounds and forced to do scams until a ransom is paid or they pay their way back out in some ways. And then these are the two extremes. But in the middle, you have people who enter willingly and then they find themselves trapped. They enter, they think they are going to make money. They think, oh, I'll be able to manage it. They might know everything that's going on. They might have heard the violence and everything, but it's not going to happen to me. It's an easy way for me to make money. Then they find themselves inside, the documents are taken away, and then they find themselves cannot get out. And then you also have people who are kidnapped, and they are trafficked inside, and then they manage to raise through the ranks, and they stay willingly. So you have these four types of victims or criminals. In criminology, they call it victim-offender overlap. There is this overlap, which makes it difficult. And what is the challenge here, as a journalist, also as a researcher? How do you ever know? How do you ever know that they're telling you the truth? It's very difficult. Because, of course, they have all incentive to exaggerate and to pose as ideal victim, right? So exaggeration stuff, it's quite common. And so it is very complicated. About the number, percentage, and everything, I think we can never know. Yeah. It depends on the compounds. The compounds, there is no such a thing as an ideal compound, like no ideal victim, no ideal compound. Every compound is different. Every country is different. Every situation is different, so it's very difficult to know. But many are there willingly, for sure. But Leo can.
Yeah. Well, I can just add some points. Like we are just talking with a bunch of hope that we do have also a group of people that they're going to another country to do something not very legal, like smuggling jade, smuggling diamond, but then they end up trapped in the scam compound. The scam is not something they don't want to do, and they don't want to be detained some places. So, but then they won't report to the police saying that, oh, I was about to go into smuggle some jade. Yeah. So that bunch of people, well, fall to the pure criminal, but are they really criminals? There's a question mark. And then also it depends on nationality that we see, because anti-scam campaign in Hong Kong, in mainland, is quite good. So we have.
About that. It was a scam call. I needed it.
No problem. Yeah. So we can say there's a lot of people, they might know what's going on in Southeast Asia, and they are opportunists. But then people from Africa, they have no knowledge about what's going on in Southeast Asia. They just got a job from call center. We got many cases this year and saying that they recruited by African agent, there's no Chinese involved, and then they fly to Vietnam, and then at that point they got kidnapped to Myanmar or to Thailand. And also it really depends on the hierarchy, like a level they are in the system. So the majority of the middle low level workers, we can say probably they are more forced. If you are a scam boss and then you are managing the money, high chance you have some willingness involved in this industry.
Yeah. And then one last question before I kick it over to our audience here. When we think about there's clearly a lot of demand for labor from inside of these scam compounds, which is why they're tricking people into going there and they're constantly recruiting and recruiting and recruiting. And one of the scams that's fueling all this demand is, you go into it at length in the book, it's called the pig butchering scam. One of my favorite parts of your book was when you really explained in depth like kind of the origins of this scam. So I'm wondering if you could brief us on what you found when you looked into the origins of the scam and how it's spread across the region.
I mean, we try to track the spread of the industry, this cluster. As I said, there are many clusters, right? So we try to look back at the history of how Southeast Asia came to become this kind of hub, right? So we look back to Taiwan in the 90s and this kind of scam, lottery scams that were using telecom technology, and then the internet and everything. So we try to track back to the 90s, Taiwan, and then we track this movement of these scammers, scam groups, and everything between countries and places and everything all over the region, always in response to law enforcement. So we go from Taiwan law enforcement catches up, they start scamming mainland Chinese law enforcement start collaborate with Taiwan, they crack down, they move to Southeast Asia, and now in Southeast Asia they keep bouncing between one country and the other, right? So that's the push factor that is very important. The very reason that this kind of operation moved to Southeast Asia, and that was not during COVID, that's another misconception probably. This is not something that happens suddenly during COVID. It was there before. It was there since the early 2010s. Chinese scholars in the mainland, they had been studying this kind of operation moved from the mainland to Southeast Asia in the early 2010s in response to this kind of law enforcement crackdown. And the reason is always that. I mean, the Chinese government has been cracking down really hard on this kind of situation, this kind of operations. And that's why they came to Southeast Asia in the first place. And so that's another thing that we need to always take into account, the push factors. And that's not something we consider enough when we look at this. This is a Chinese industry in terms of involvement of groups and everything. But the very reason they're down there in Cambodia, Laos, Philippines, and Myanmar is that it had become very difficult for them to operate in the mainland and Taiwan because they were really cracking down hard on this. It is always missing, often missing in discussions, I think. And yeah, I think that's it. And now the future of the industry again. Cambodia. I mean, now Cambodia is big. Cambodia. I think all the eyes are on Myanmar, but Cambodia is probably the main hub for this kind of operations, but we know they're spreading elsewhere and they are like linking up in Africa, in other places, Latin America. There is evidence of this kind of groups being active. And I think just one last thing. Okay, so they moved to Southeast Asia in the early 2010s. What happened with COVID, around COVID, right before COVID actually, was a change in the political economy of the industry. What changed is that in the early 2010s and 2090s, these were small operations. They were very small. They were based in villas, apartments. They were based in this kind of like really small facilities. They were like almost family-based operations. Like in China, they had the Ansi County, where that was the predominant mode to get money at the time in the 2000s. What changed is that they scaled up. They industrialized. In the 2010s, after 2015, 16, we cannot say a specific time, but they scaled up. They figured out that if they came together, if they coalesced in this kind of compounds where you had like dozens of operations, they could share the infrastructure, they could share the protection fees, everything got much easier. And that's what happened. That's why Southeast Asia became so predominant, because they scaled up. They figured out how to pay off the local authorities, local law enforcement, and industrialize their own operations. That's what happened. So. Pig butchering is one example of scam that's quite innovative, but...
Can you explain, for anyone who's not familiar, what pig butchering actually is?
Well, I mean, like, if you look at the types of scam, in general, I mean, traditionally, there are two main types. One is investment scam. Investment scam is when somebody out of the blue calls you and say, oh, I have this amazing investment opportunity, right? Give me money and I will pay you back 10 times as much. That's a traditional, pure investment scam. And of course, like, you don't trust, maybe somebody will trust, it happens because investment scam can be successful. But it's quite problematic because, I mean, if someone comes to you out of the blue, say, I have an amazing opportunity, you doubt it, right? I mean, like, yeah. And the other scam, the big scam, is a romance scam. Romance scam is someone who approaches you on dating apps or in real life, not in real life, but in many ways. They approach you and establish a relationship. And what happens is after they gain your trust, they came up with some crisis. So my mother is in hospital and I need money, please send me money. And this is a pure romance scam, right? Recently there was a case in Italy of someone who was tricked by someone pretending to be Brad Pitt's mother, claiming that Brad Pitt was in hospital, and then she was scammed out of hundreds of thousands of euros. And that was a big case in Italy. But that's a romance scam, right? Pig butchering is different. Pig butchering is very innovative and creative in that it mixes the two. They create trust, they establish a relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic. I mean, we call it pig butchery, which is a very problematic term, because it's the language the criminals use, right? But it's also called rom-com, crypto-rom, that kind of the romance angle. It's not always there. There is an element of trust, of friendship, of like this kind of relationship, a friendly relationship or romantic relationship can be both. So you create trust, but at the end it's not a crisis, my mother is dying or something. At the end is, I have an opportunity for you. When you gain trust. And then they mix the two types of scam. And that's it's more difficult to recognize for a victim, right? Yep. And that's another thing, like victims are always shamed, like I just did. I stated the story of this Brad Pitt scam, right? It makes it sound like, oh my God, the victims are delusional. I just did it. It's wrong. Because the scammers are really creative. They're really good at getting your trust. There is a whole, in the media, you see, there is a whole genre of people say, I never thought it would happen to me because I have a PhD, I'm an editor at a big magazine and everything, but I lost everything. There is a whole series of articles of people like that. It's very common, and there is nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, it's terrifying how good they are. Yeah. But that's pig butchery.
Yeah. Could happen to anyone, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to add that we're only talking about the scam victims of pig butchering, but then the human trafficking victims also get lured by this type of scam. So we got several, unfortunately, female victims. They start dating someone, and they're always quite young age, like 16, 17. They don't know where's golden triangle, so they have this boyfriend taking care of them, and then they say, oh, I'm in Laos, I'm in Cambodia. Do you want to come to meet me? And they are willingly to come to that country, then get kidnapped. So they are targeting everyone. It's not only the scam victims. Yeah.
That's why it's so important to be aware of this. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to open up the questions from the audience. Anyone want to ask any question? Yes, here in the front. Oh, wait, sir, we'll bring the microphone to you. And just give us your name first and affiliation, and then ask your question.
Hi, Joshua Zimmerman, no affiliation, FCC member.
There you go.
Kidnapping and enslaving people is expensive and difficult. As agentic AI becomes more and more powerful and cheaper, will the scammers turn to that, and will they be able to sort of infinitely scale off the AI, off the technology?
Yeah, that's a question. Want to take it?
Yeah. So we do have, we did a research with AI team, and then we are thinking of the same, like can they replace human beings, human laborers with AI? And then so we did, we have this chat bot, and then so they are helping us to do like greetings, how are you? And then you are very beautiful, this kind of like before the investment chatting. And then we choose 20 participants, and then give them AI tool and one real person to talk to them for 1 week. And then like I think 18 out of them saying, they all choose AI, saying that the emotional support was perfect. But then when we ask them, can you point out which one is AI? They all successfully point out which one, because it's too perfect. And we have this, and then we talk to some informants inside the scam compound. Ask them, do you think your company are going to use this kind of technology? And they said, might be, but then we don't want it to look too AI. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if those people still can kidnap victims and then get ransom from their family, why we don't use it? It's 20%, 200% more like a profit than using pure AI. So it's going to expand together. So the AI technology and the human trafficking. I don't think it will be end very soon.
Other questions? Yes, there in the back.
Hi, I'm Harochid.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the size of the industry and the demand side, I guess, and if you're seeing an increase in that. I mean, a lot on this is the supply, this is the industry that's providing the scams out. Who are the victims of the scams? Is that growing? Is technology enabling that to grow? Is that why so many of these scam centres are growing? Can you talk a bit about the sort of other side, I guess, of the equation?
Looking at the numbers of people who are working in the industry, or
No, I mean the victims of at the other end of the phone call. That you're sort of, that for these industries to be growing and coming together, are we seeing more people susceptible to scams?
The victims of the scams, right?
Yeah, the number and then.
We don't have numbers. I mean, we see numbers. There are always numbers about the size of the industry on one side, the victims, and how much money is getting taken out of victims. We see numbers. Like there was one study that was saying, like, by scholars in the US, they were doing some crypto trace blockchain analysis, and they found $75 billion over 4 years from 2020. But it's a partial number. UNODC, the UN also, they have their own numbers, but it's all very partial. As good as your blockchain analysis skills are, you still, like, it's a very small, very partial picture. So the numbers are out there, but they are not really reliable. Not for lack of trying, not for lack of effort, but still. But another thing that is quite problematic here is on the scam side, the workforce is the hundreds of thousands. But again, since we don't know how many of them are doing it willingly or not, it's very difficult to say. The UN was talking about 120,000 in Myanmar, 100,000 in Cambodia. So that's the size probably, but again, they're not pure victims of human trafficking. Many are doing it willingly. On the scam victim side, you have to think about the shame, what I just said, the shame. Many will not even admit that they have been scammed because, I mean, I will feel stupid. How can I be so stupid? So that complicates it. Like you can see the self-reporting numbers, but it's a very low number compared to the real situation. So that's a common issue. And so yeah, it's very difficult to answer in that sense.
Well, I can also add something about the AI again. So I know that there are 3 ways of using AI in the scam compound. So the first thing is using ChatGPT to do translation. And we do, this year, found a compound, they are targeting Arabic speakers. And then our victim, she was from Uganda. So you don't need to speak Arabic at all. They just need one person in the team can overview, speak Arabic, and make sure like everything goes well. And then face and voice swapping, that's for sure. And also now, like they have this technology of the one team are using one laptop, kind of. So every time you want to swap the face, you go to that laptop, and then you can talk to the victim, pretending to be that person. And that facilitates that kind of like it's a application or platform, we don't know, but then it can be shared with different groups, so they can targeting victims at the same time using one figure, right? And then of course automatic buckle messaging. That's hi, hello. They can send out this kind of message. Oh, I'm Lola. Are you? No. This kind of message, like 1 hour, more than thousands of messages.
Just one more thing, just very quickly. I mean, like another thing that to bear in mind, like we are talking about pig butchery, right? Which is again industrialized scam, as I say, teams and tools and everything. And that's a kind of long con. It's a long con. But think about, if you think about the small scams, the e-commerce scams, the fake loans, all the small that maybe scamming like an Indian farmer out of $100, that kind of stuff. And that we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Because who bothers to report that kind of small scam? If you count that in, then you see this is massive. And that's why that growing and growing, because there is a lot of money to be made. It's not all pig butchery. It's not all official impersonation. Official impersonation is the other very common type of scam, right? Which you pretend to be a police officer, a government officer. Maybe they are targeting Chinese students overseas, pretending to be consulate or embassy official. You know, that takes effort. There are all these kind of smaller scams that are much more common, and they take probably out much more money from victims. If you count everything, it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely right. And what all of these estimates have in common is they're all in the tens of billions. It's hard to put a precise figure on it, but they're all consistently saying tens of billions. And from my own investigative reporting on this for ProPublica, I found that it's not just actually crypto that's being used. Also, bank accounts are often also used to solicit and move money from victims. So it's not, another misconception, I guess, is it's not just a crypto scam. Actually, banks are used for this fraud as well. Other questions? Yep. Maybe this gentleman here. Wait for Mike, please. Yeah.
Cheers. I'm Richard. One of my questions was, so the Chinese government's attitude to a lot of the military juntas around the Cambodian and Myanmar border that fund a lot of these scam centers has been kind of shifting over the past few years. And in 2024, I think we saw a big crackdown with the arrest of a lot of the prominent warlords like Baiswatch Hong. So I think the question is, what's the Chinese government's law enforcement attitude right now in 2025 towards a lot of these juntas and how they operate?
Well, as I mentioned, Chinese government is cracking down really hard. I mean, they crack down in different ways in different places according to local conditions. Again, they can't use the same kind of strong-handed enforcement tactics that they use in North Myanmar with Cambodia. In Cambodia, they have to be more careful. They still want to be on the Cambodian government good side, so they can't just come in and just like sweep and arrest everyone. But generally speaking, the mainland Chinese government has been cracking down really hard. If you go to the mainland, I'm sure you do, you see everywhere is anti-scam ads, and you go to the immigration places, police stations, and everything, all videos about this. Don't go there, don't do this, be careful, and everything. So I would say that it's quite fair to say that the Chinese government has been really active in cracking down on this. We all see the reports about, oh, the Chinese government care only if they target Chinese citizens. But in our research, we can't find evidence of that, of this kind of selective approach. China is the Chinese government, China as a country and everybody is facing a massive loss of face because of this. I really can't see, they face massive loss of money because even the official numbers are huge. The money that are getting out of China when China is trying to enforce controls on capital flow and everything, and then also they're trying to boost consumption. You look at the money going out, it's huge. And there are massive loss of face, massive loss of money. What is the end game here? Gaining influence? How? In our research, we don't find convincing evidence of this. We all see the reports. We know about the individuals linked to some compounds. We all see that. But this idea of China as being the mastermind behind the compound to gain influence or undermine the West or whatever, I find it quite unconvincing. But that doesn't mean that there are things that need to be explored more. We do see contractors in the compound who build the compound. In some cases, we see state-owned enterprises who have been contracted by whoever is behind the compound to build the facilities, right? That we see. That needs to be explored. But those are not stakeholders, they're not shareholders. They build, they get contract. We don't know if in lack of due diligence that exists. We see individuals taking credit for Belt and Road Initiative. I am a businessman, I'm a criminal, whatever. My compound is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. A lot of businessmen do that. We see that too. So it's complicated, but I would say overall, we didn't find evidence of a systematic involvement of the Chinese state in this kind of industry. It wouldn't make much sense. The very reason why they moved to Southeast Asia was to get away from China in the first place. So I get that this is a very controversial topic and very problematic. But again, one of the points of the book was, let's not make it all about China. Let's look at local responsibilities. Let's look at global trends, because this is about surveillance. This is about certain tools, AI and stuff like that. That is a global challenge. And also, from a policy perspective, I'm not an AI person. I don't want to be. From a policy perspective, this is a common challenge, right? These scammers are targeting people everywhere, in Europe, US, China, everywhere, right? If you say China is behind this, you just undermine probably one thing where you can still find common ground. What's the end game here? What is it to gain from this? We can still criticize and have critical scrutiny, which we need to. But still, it needs to be grounded. And so far, I don't think we found enough evidence to say, oh, China is behind this.
We have time for maybe a couple more questions before we wrap up. Maybe here in the front, in the green. Just wait for a microphone, please.
Jacobson, thank you so much for your presentation. And my question is about like the transnational nature of a lot of these scam centers. And we just talked about the role of China, whether or not it should be more, should be less, and what about, and because you look at some place like, Shui Koko in like Myanmar, Myawaddy, it's in Myanmar, it borders Thailand and gets electricity and internet from Thailand. So the victims are like from Hong Kong, from China, from everywhere in the world. Like, whose responsibility is it to solve such a transnational problem? I mean, you mentioned the Chinese government is cracking hard on it. The Thai government responded for that by cutting off temporarily internet and I think electricity is from state-owned, like a Thai state-owned company. Like, does the Thai government have some responsibility? And if you talk about the Myanmar side, it's in an area where it's controlled by basically ethnic armed groups that are not controlled by central government. So whose responsibility is it on the Myanmar side? And then from the Hong Kong side, so we're in Hong Kong, like Hong Kong has a role as well. Not only are the victims Hong Kong, but what do you think about, because a lot of these financial crimes, even if the victims and the scammers are not in Hong Kong, a lot of the money does come through Hong Kong. So Hong Kong does have jurisdiction over a lot of these sort of illicit funds that are flowing through bank accounts in Hong Kong before being transferred to other countries, right? So what should the Hong Kong government do, the mainland government do, sort of in basically any country that's touching on, like, do in their part to try to solve this problem? Sorry, long question.
I mean, that's the main question, right? I mean, like, nobody knows who is supposed to do something. That's the main issue for law enforcement. Who has responsibility here? And then again, if you look at a local agency, they have protective umbrellas, so you cannot expect the border guard force in Myanmar to crack down on their own source of revenue. But who can do that? The Myanmar central government? Of course not. And now, so it's just again, it's a mess. It's a global challenge again, and then it's like the only way to talk, to coordinate everything. But you cannot do that if China is doing their own thing. The U.S. is the U.S. U.S. was playing a role. It's gone. That's another sore point that we should probably discuss, because there were efforts of trying to find a way to coordinate, bringing people together, civil society and government, and it's still going on to a certain extent, of course, not stopped completely. But what has been going on with the Trump administration has been a massive blow to any effort to put an end to this. If you are a criminal, this is the best time for you. It's the best. Like, all the effort to undermine, to control, to put you in check is just like systematically undermined. Yeah. If you are a victim of human trafficking, you're trying to get out of a compound in Cambodia, you still can count on individuals or some organization trying to help, like, really laying low and everything, but it's just. Yeah. So there is no clear answer. I mean, the only way would be to cooperate, would be not, and it's not to say it's only the US responsibility and everything. China also, they have their own, like, it's not that easy, right, to establish a collaboration with law enforcement in China. They are all insular, right, China, US, or the West, or whatever you want to call it, like. But again, that's the point. That's what we were trying to do with the book, try to say, let's look beyond this kind of, China, or whatever, and let's try to figure out beyond that, what are the challenges? I mean, if it's a global technology, the platform, the banks, Singapore, Hong Kong, the blockchain, all the crypto stuff, the industry, they all play a role in different parts of the industry. If we go beyond the simply obsession with China, and we look also at what we can do, and we look at the platforms, how can we stop the deceptive advertisement? Blockchain, the crypto firms, how can they stop funds? How can law enforcement, maybe in China, talk to law enforcement outside? And the distrust is mutual. Again, I'm not saying China is, wow, it's great. It's just like, it doesn't work like that. But yeah, that's the lack of coordination, lack of dialogue, and then it's getting worse for several reasons. So it's quite bleak, I would say. I mean, like, I'm quite pessimistic at this time.
And from the human trafficking point of view, like, we got recently a Zimbabwe victim got trafficked by a Rwanda person to Vietnam, and then it's a Vietnamese broker smuggled him to Cambodia. So they're 4 countries already. And then he was asked to target UK victims, scam victims. So which jurisdiction can play a role in his case. Now we rescue him out, and he asked us, can I get a legal support? I was like, from where? Which NGO I should contact, which law enforcement I should contact. And then the USAID cut for sure that it's not USAID only problem. Like we see from the beginning of this year, after the USAID cut, the expansion of the scam compound, at least in Cambodia, is massive. It's now all over the border of Cambodia, Vietnam, and Cambodia and Thailand. And then that's also interesting or funny thing. After the Thailand threatened Cambodia to cut the electricity in Phoi Phe, a lot of scam compound boss in the Telegram group was like complaining, like, oh, how they dare to do that? We give a lot of money to the Cambodian government. So, yeah.
They want to return on their investment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to think of a more transnational, international type of crime than this. I don't think there's ever been anything like it in history. So thank you so much for helping us understand it better. Just to wrap up, you mentioned in your book that the online scam industry is unlikely to go away anytime soon. And I'm wondering, as difficult as it might be, if you could just take out your crystal ball, and if you were to look ahead in terms of how this is going to develop, what do you see in the future in terms of either the policy response or how this industry and this threat is likely to develop in the coming years?
I mean, there is a lot of money to be made, so that's the reason why it's unlikely to go away. And I think I see a bigger role for AI at some point, which in some ways will reduce the reliance on these kind of workers because they're expensive to bring in and complicated, and they also expose you to backlash, right? Because when they get out, they will report on you and everything. So if you have AI, on one side you make money because you sell them back to the families, so that's a ransom, that's money, but on the other side they're a liability. So I would see AI playing a bigger role, which was the point of the research we did. With those AI people. That's definitely a trend that is going on, and they will branch out. So far, Cambodia is still a good place to be. And think about it. I mean, like Cambodia right now, for instance, is being threatened with tariffs. Cambodia, the economy, the legal economy, is reliant on two things, mainly three things. Construction, okay. Tourism. Tourism is gone. Why? Because the Chinese government is telling the citizens, Chinese citizens, don't go to Cambodia because it's dangerous. It has been doing that for years now. It's reliant on what? The other pillar of the Cambodian economy, what is it? Garment. And now you have the US saying, Cambodia, we are slapping you with a 36% tariff on your garment export. Don't you dare even to get Chinese stuff and then sold to outside of the US as if it's Cambodian. Don't you dare to cheat us. So you are depriving, and I'm not justifying Cambodia, the Cambodian government in any way here. But you have to think that this is an economy that is really in a really bad shape. Myanmar too, of course, different reason, every place is different. You are taking away the incentive. I mean, the law for a local businessman and everything, and just you consider resorting to crime at that point. And again, I'm not defending them, but think about the structure, think about the context, how does it play out? So I think it's going to get worse in that area. There is no incentive to get away from the scam economy. And another thing is like local communities also rely on that. I'm not saying they're scammers. I'm not saying they're complicit. But who is getting the food? Who is providing food to the scammers inside the compounds? Who are the delivery workers? Who are the construction workers? Who are the cleaners? That's one of the main sources for local communities. And again, I'm not saying they have criminal responsibility. They're doing stuff that is perfectly legal. Delivering food, cooking food, stuff. But think about that. It's very complicated. It's very complex. It's not black and white. Obviously, nothing is. But so I'm very concerned about all this development. I don't see things going in the right direction.
Yeah, Cambodia seems primed for explosive growth in this area, unfortunately. Ling, any closing thoughts you wanted to share?
Oh no, I just completely agree with Ivan. Maybe the next one is Georgia has been there for a long time, but then nobody really talking about it, and it's still legal for online gambling, and then so that's a mix of online gambling and scamming there. Well, they tried to move to Dubai. That's a lot of people heard, but then the reason they come back now they are withdrawing from Dubai is the law enforcement that put a restriction, and also they have the law after I think it was 2 years ago saying that if you confiscated the worker's passport, then it's a crime. And then also, like that's from the scam, the informant saying that it's super expensive to live in Dubai, so they cannot afford it. That's why Southeast Asia still a really
Cheaper
good
cost
fund.
of living, yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for this deeply important and very nuanced look at this industry. It's just so helpful and it's so important. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. And there's obviously a lot more to it. It's an ongoing story. So for people who are interested in your work, tell us how can they stay in touch and continue to follow your work? Tell us about Global China Pulse and if you're on LinkedIn, or how can people stay in touch?
I edit these two journals, Made in China Journal and Global China Pulse, and they're all open access and free. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, you will get it we send out a newsletter every month. It's not only about scams, it's about China and global China, so everything. So that's the thing. And for scam stuff, we have established an NGO, an NPO. So
tell us about that. You have an NGO, tell us about the NGO.
Oh yeah, you can talk about the NGO.
We registered NGO in Italy, and it's a non-profit, and we're doing 3 things. So aftercare for the victims, mainly in Cambodia. And then we do investigation of the scam compound. So we do mapping of the compound, what's the link between the criminal networks and the compound, and then the elite players. And also we do research. That's like the AI and all these things. Yeah.
Yeah, so we are setting up the website. The NGO already exists, but we will have this NPO, which is called EOS Collective, EOS, E-O-S. And then we will set up a newsletter, I suppose, at some point soon. But yeah.
We look forward to following EOS and your book and everything. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Everyone, stick around for a book signing. Get your copy here. And thank you so much all for coming.